Nathaniel Okoro was born into wealth, but lived like he had nothing. At his father's funeral he was mocked, ridiculed, and forced to beg for an inheritance his own blood swore he didn't deserve. But what if the beggar they despised was already the true owner of the empire? Why did his family see him as less? How did the forgotten son hold the very keys to the fortune? And what secret was powerful enough to turn mourning into war? The clouds hung heavy over St. Augustine Cathedral, weeping rain on the grand funeral of Chief Richard Okoro, one of the nation's most powerful billionaires. The world had come to mourn him, presidents, governors, CEOs, all in black silk and tailored suits. Cameras flashed as convoys of luxury cars pulled in. The Okoro name was a magnet for attention, but the storm that brewed inside the family was stronger than the one outside. Amid the flood of mourners, Nathaniel arrived, not in a sleek Bentley or limousine but in a battered taxi. His suit was pressed but plain, his shoes polished but worn. In his hand he clutched a battered leather notebook, close to his chest like a shield. It was all he carried, but it was everything. Pathetic, Vanessa muttered, her eyes sweeping over him with disdain. Does he really think he belongs here? Raymond smirked, adjusting his gold cufflinks. He belongs in the dust, not in this cathedral. Grace, their mother, lowered her veil just enough to let her voice slice through the air. He will get nothing. And today the world will see it. The words struck Nathaniel's ears, but his steps never faltered. They thought his silence was weakness, but it was discipline. They thought his plainness was poverty, but it was preparation. He walked past them, calm, his eyes fixed on the polished casket at the altar. The service was long and solemn, filled with speeches that painted Chief Richard as a visionary. But Nathaniel's mind was elsewhere, replaying the moment weeks earlier when his father had placed a sealed envelope in his hand. The one who kneels today will stand tomorrow, his father had said, his voice heavy with meaning. As the final hymn ended, mourners began approaching the casket one by one. Nathaniel came last. His palm rested gently on the wood, his lips whispering, "I'll honor you, Father, even if they never see me." Behind him came the scoffing voice of Grace, sharp and deliberate. Some people should know their place. This empire was not built for beggars. Laughter from his siblings followed, loud enough for cameras to catch. Journalists scribbled hungrily, ready to turn humiliation into headlines. By tomorrow, tabloids would scream, "Forgotten son humiliated at billionaire's funeral." But Nathaniel only held the notebook tighter. There was a faint smile on his lips, not of arrogance but of certainty. Because he knew the storm wasn't his to fear. The real storm was about to fall on those who laughed. This funeral was not an ending, it was the beginning of an unraveling. And soon the world would see that the boy they forced to kneel already owned the empire they fought to control. Nathaniel Okoro was the first son, but he was never treated like one. His childhood carried the weight of contradictions. Born of the same blood as the Okoro heirs, yet raised as though he were invisible. His mother, Amaka, had been Chief Richard's first love, but also the woman the Okoro family despised. She was not of noble blood or wealthy lineage. She was a schoolteacher from a small village who believed in honesty and dignity more than status. Grace, Richard's second wife and the mother of Vanessa and Raymond, made sure Amaka and her son were erased from the golden picture of the Okoro Empire. With venom hidden behind expensive perfumes, she whispered poison into Richard's ears until Amaka left the mansion with nothing but her child in her arms. Nathaniel grew up in modest conditions, watching his mother patch school uniforms and stretch meager meals while the tabloids praised his father's wealth. "Never envy them," Amaka would say, her voice both tender and stern. "What you carry inside is greater than what they flaunt outside." But life was not kind. Amaka fell ill when Nathaniel was only 17. He worked 3 jobs to pay hospital bills, washing cars by day, serving tables by night, and tutoring younger children on weekends. Meanwhile, his siblings, Vanessa and Raymond, flaunted designer clothes and posed for magazine covers, celebrated as the heirs of the Okoro Empire. The contrast was painful, but it forged Nathaniel differently. While they chased vanity, he learned resilience. While they lived on allowances, he learned the value of labor. While they saw money as entitlement, he saw it as responsibility. Yet fate carried irony. Though they dismissed him, Nathaniel remained his father's most attentive son. Chief Richard, aging and weary of boardroom politics, secretly met Nathaniel in quiet cafes and humble parks away from the cameras. Richard admired the humility in his first son, the very humility the others mocked. "You remind me of myself before power corrupted me," Richard once confessed, sliding an envelope of company documents across the table. "One day, you will understand why I trust you more than anyone else." But Nathaniel never flaunted these meetings. He endured insults in silence, letting his siblings call him the beggar's son, while he quietly studied the empire his father built. He learned about the oil contracts, the real estate holdings, the overseas accounts, knowledge hidden behind that battered leather notebook he carried everywhere. Still, doubts gnawed at him. Would the world ever respect him as an Okoro? Or was he destined to be the ghost child, forever in the shadows of a family that despised him? Foreshadowing lingered in his mother's final words on her deathbed: "They will strip you bare, my son. They will make you beg. But remember, he who bends today may rise taller tomorrow." Her prophecy echoed at the funeral years later. Nathaniel had indeed been made to kneel, but the storm that followed would prove Amaka's words true. The funeral had barely ended when whispers turned into daggers. Inside the sprawling Okoro mansion, its marble floors gleaming under crystal chandeliers, Vanessa and Raymond huddled in the private study with their mother, Grace. The doors were locked, the curtains drawn. On the mahogany desk lay a single document, the draft of their father's will. "He cannot be allowed to inherit anything," Vanessa hissed, pacing the room. Her high heels struck the floor like gavel blows. "Do you know what the press is already calling him? The beggar heir. If we don't act, he'll stain everything father built." Raymond leaned back in his chair, twirling a glass of brandy. He was the embodiment of arrogance, wearing wealth like armor. "Relax, sister. Nathaniel is weak. Look at him, arriving in a taxi dressed like a clerk. The board will laugh at him. He doesn't even belong in our world." Grace, however, was not laughing. Her eyes burned with a venom that outmatched both her children's. "Don't underestimate him," she said sharply. "Your father always had a soft spot for that boy. If he left him something, anything, it could shift power away from us. And power is not something we share." Vanessa stopped pacing. "So what do we do?" "We strip him of dignity first," Grace replied coldly. "If we humiliate him enough, he won't dare to claim anything. Make him beg. Make him crawl. By the time the will is read, no one will take him seriously." The words landed like poison. Raymond smirked. "Humiliate him? That's easy. We'll make sure the world sees him as the bastard son who came back for scraps." Vanessa's eyes gleamed with cruelty. "And when he falls apart publicly, we'll swoop in and paint ourselves as the rightful heirs. The media loves a good spectacle." Grace leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "But remember, if there's anything hidden in that will, anything that names him, we bury it. No hesitation." For a moment, silence lingered. The chandelier above flickered, as though the house itself recoiled at her words. But Raymond broke it with laughter. "Mother, you should have been a general. Ruthless and precise." Vanessa raised her glass. "To our victory." As they toasted, none of them noticed the faint shadow standing outside the door, an elderly servant loyal to Chief Richard, who had overheard every word. His hands trembled as he gripped the tray he carried. Should he tell Nathaniel? Or would speaking cost him his life? Foreshadowing whispered in that silence. Because while the siblings plotted to destroy Nathaniel, they had no idea that their father's final decision had already shifted the balance of power. And the more they schemed, the closer they pushed themselves toward the very downfall they feared. In their arrogance they thought they controlled the game. But the game had already been set long before Richard Okoro drew his last breath. The grand hall of the Okoro estate was filled with journalists, dignitaries, and board members of the family's companies. Crystal chandeliers glowed brightly, but beneath their light was a storm of hidden malice. Today was the reading of Chief Richard Okoro's will. Nathaniel stood at the edge of the room, his plain suit a sharp contrast to the shimmering gowns and designer tuxedos around him. He clutched his worn notebook like armor. Every camera seemed to tilt toward him, ready to capture his fall. Vanessa seized the moment, her voice dripping with condescension. "Look who decided to show up," she said loudly enough for microphones to catch. "Our family beggar. Tell me, Nathaniel, did you borrow that suit from your taxi driver?" Laughter erupted, cruel and deliberate. Raymond added fuel. "Perhaps we should pass a hat around for him. After all, it's not cheap to beg for inheritance." The board members chuckled uneasily, not daring to cross the airs of the Okoro Empire. Even the journalists smirked, pens flying across their notepads. Headlines were already forming: Okoro outcast reduced to pleading. Grace stepped forward like a queen surveying a conquered foe. "Nathaniel, if you truly believe you belong here, then prove it. Kneel. Beg before this family. Beg before the world. Perhaps then we'll consider your claim." The demand silenced the room. Even the camera stilled. Everyone knew this was more than humiliation. It was execution of dignity. For a moment, Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Memories of his mother's last words flashed in his mind. They will strip you bare. They will make you beg. But he who bends today may rise taller tomorrow. Slowly, deliberately, Nathaniel sank to his knees. Gasps filled the room. Clicks of cameras immortalized the moment. His siblings smiled victoriously. To them this was the end. "Speak it," Vanessa commanded. "Say you need us. Say you cannot live without this inheritance." Nathaniel's eyes lifted, calm and steady. His voice was low but it carried. "If kneeling is the price of truth, then here I am. If begging reveals hearts, then let the world see who truly deserves what my father left behind." The room shifted uneasily. His words didn't sound like defeat, they sounded like warning. But Raymond, sensing their control slipping, barked, "Enough. He admits it. He is nothing without us." Laughter returned, louder this time. Nathaniel rose slowly, dusting his knees. He said nothing more, only pressing his notebook to his chest with that same faint, knowing smile. The journalists smelled blood and scribbled furiously, but what they didn't realize was that the story they were writing was incomplete. The humiliation was only half the tale. The twist that waited ahead would turn those same headlines into their opposites. For in the very act of kneeling, Nathaniel had fulfilled prophecy, and unknowingly set the stage for the inheritance war that would tear the Okoro family apart. The lawyer, Mr. Adeyemi, stood at the front of the hall, his voice steady as he unsealed the official envelope. The air grew tense. The entire Okoro empire seemed to hold its breath. Grace, Vanessa, and Raymond sat tall, smug with confidence. They had already staged Nathaniel's humiliation, now they only awaited their victory. Mr. Adeyemi cleared his throat. "The last testament and will of Chief Richard Okoro?" His words carried weight, each syllable slicing through the silence. "To my beloved wife, Grace, I leave the Lagos estate and its accompanying properties. To my daughter, Vanessa, I leave the art collections and luxury holdings in Paris and Dubai. To my son, Raymond, I leave the yacht fleet and 25% of the oil subsidiaries." The family nodded in satisfaction. Everything was proceeding as expected. But then the lawyer's voice shifted, deliberate and solemn. "And to my first son, Nathaniel Okoro?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. All eyes turned toward the man they had mocked minutes earlier. Cameras zoomed in on his face. "I leave controlling interest of Okoro Holdings International, including all major subsidiaries, accounts and shares. Effective immediately, Nathaniel Okoro is recognized as the majority owner and chairman of the Okoro Empire." The room erupted into chaos. Vanessa shot to her feet. "This is a fraud. A lie." Raymond slammed his fist on the table. "Impossible. He's a nobody. He doesn't deserve this." Grace's face turned pale beneath her veil, but her fury was palpable. "Mr. Adeyemi, you will explain yourself. My husband would never give the empire to him." But the lawyer only adjusted his glasses, unshaken. Chief Richard was clear and precise. He even included a handwritten letter, sealed with his personal stamp. "I will read it now." He unfolded the letter, and the words struck harder than any thunder. "To my son Nathaniel, you were never blinded by riches nor corrupted by vanity. You understand sacrifice, humility, and responsibility. These are the qualities I trust to preserve this empire. The others will seek power for themselves. But you, your strength is for others. To you I leave it all. Lead with integrity." The words silenced the hall. Even the cameras paused as if stunned. Nathaniel stood frozen, his notebook pressed to his chest. It was not triumph he felt, but a storm of emotions: grief for his father, disbelief at the scale of the gift, and the heavy weight of responsibility now thrust upon him. But his siblings could not contain themselves. Vanessa lunged toward the lawyer, her voice shrieking. "He forged it. He manipulated father. I won't accept this." Raymond turned to the cameras, desperate. "This man is not the heir. He's a fraud parading his family." Grace, her composure cracking, whispered venomously, "If we cannot take it legally, we will take it by force." The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Journalists scribbled wildly, torn between scandal and shock. The empire was now in the hands of the son they once called a beggar. And though Nathaniel remained calm, the storm of controversy was only just beginning. The hall was still buzzing with shock when Vanessa stormed out, her heels striking the marble floor like war drums. Raymond followed close behind, his jaw clenched, his pride bleeding with every step. Grace remained seated, her expression stone cold, but her silence carried more danger than any outburst. In the privacy of the East Wing, away from the cameras and journalists, The family's fury erupted. "This cannot stand," Vanessa shouted, tearing off her diamond necklace as if it choked her. "That bastard humiliated us in front of the world. First, he kneels like a beggar, and now he's the master of the empire?" Raymond slammed a vase against the wall, shards scattering like their broken pride. "I should have been the heir. I was groomed for this. Father promised me." Grace's voice cut through their anger like a blade. "Your father promised many things. But he was also a man full of regrets. And Nathaniel was his redemption." Vanessa spat the words like venom. "Redemption? He's nothing but a parasite. He doesn't belong to us." Grace finally rose, her eyes blazing with a fury that both frightened and fueled her children. "Enough crying. We cannot change the will, but we can control what happens next." Raymond looked at her warily. "What do you mean?" Her lips curled into a thin smile. "Power isn't just about papers and signatures. It's about perception, loyalty, and fear. Nathaniel may have the title, but we can make sure he never truly rules." Vanessa's eyes widened with cruel excitement. "You mean, turn the board against him? The press? Make the world despise him?" Grace nodded slowly. "Yes. If he is seen as weak, incompetent, or corrupt, the empire will crumble around him. And when it does, we'll be there to pick up the pieces." Raymond smirked, pouring himself another drink. "I can handle the board. Most of them owe me favors anyway. I'll plant doubts, whisper that Nathaniel is unfit, that he'll ruin the company. They'll beg for my leadership." Vanessa leaned closer, lowering her voice. "And I'll handle the media. I'll feed them stories, scandals, lies, anything that makes him look like a fraud. By the time we're done, he'll wish he never stepped foot into this mansion." Grace clasped both their hands, her voice deadly calm. "And if he resists, if he dares fight back, we will destroy him completely. Remember, children, in this family, blood is not thicker than power." The words lingered like a curse, sealing their pact. But what they didn't know was that betrayal always carried a price. For every move they plotted in the shadows, another set of eyes was watching. And the empire they thought they could break might already have been secured by forces far greater than their schemes. Nathaniel had been underestimated all his life. And this betrayal would only awaken the side of him they had never seen before. That night, while the Okoro mansion buzzed with whispers of betrayal, Nathaniel sat quietly in his late father's study. The leather notebook lay open on the desk, its pages filled with handwritten notes, dates, and figures, years of secret conversations with Chief Richard. Yet even with the empire legally in his hands, Nathaniel felt no triumph. He felt the weight of an empire pressing against his shoulders. A soft knock broke the silence. The door creaked open, revealing Elder Chaik, the oldest servant in the house. His frame was bent with age, but his eyes burned with urgency. "My son," Chaik whispered, closing the door behind him. "There are things you must know. Things your father wanted hidden until the right time." Nathaniel straightened, wary. "What things?" The old man hesitated, glancing around as if the walls had ears. "I served this family for over 50 years. I watched your mother walk out of this house in tears, and I watched your father regret it every day after. But I also watched Grace. She is more dangerous than you realize." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "I know she hates me." Chaik shook his head. "It is deeper than hate. She plotted against your mother. She forced her out, whispering lies to your father until he believed them. And when your mother became ill, Grace blocked every attempt your father made to bring her back. He wanted to reconcile. She made sure he never could." The words cut Nathaniel to the core. His fists clenched, memories of his mother's suffering flooding back. But Chaik wasn't finished. His voice lowered to a conspiratorial whisper. "And tonight, after the will was read, I overheard them. Grace, Vanessa, and Raymond, they plan to destroy you. They want to turn the board and the press against you, to strip you of power piece by piece. If that fails," Chaik hesitated, his eyes dark with fear. "They will not stop at words." Nathaniel leaned back, his face unreadable. But his silence was heavy, like the calm before a storm. "Why are you telling me this now?" Nathaniel asked finally. Chaik bowed his head. "Because your father entrusted me with a secret. One last safeguard. He knew Grace would fight you. He prepared something for you, hidden in the vault beneath this study. He said only you would understand its worth." Nathaniel's eyes flickered toward the floor, where the carpet stretched over polished wood. He had always suspected his father kept more than books in this study. Chaik placed a small brass key on the desk. His wrinkled hand trembled. "Your father said this. If they make him beg, then he will rise. And when he rises, this key will open the truth." Nathaniel picked up the key, its weight heavier than gold. For the first time that day, his lips curved into a faint smile. Not of arrogance but of certainty. The war for the empire was no longer about inheritance. It was about survival. And with the secret his father left behind, Nathaniel was no longer the hunted. He was becoming the hunter. The study was silent, except for the steady ticking of the grandfather clock. Nathaniel knelt on the polished floor, moving the carpet aside until his fingers brushed against cold iron. There it was, a hidden hatch built seamlessly into the wood. For years, he had sat in this room with his father, unaware of what lay beneath his feet. He inserted the brass key Elder Chike had given him. The lock clicked, and with a heavy groan, the hatch swung open to reveal a narrow staircase spiraling downward. The air that rose from below smelled of dust, metal, and secrets long buried. Carrying a lantern, Nathaniel descended into the vault. The walls were lined with steel cabinets, each stamped with his father's insignia. Boxes of documents, contracts, and sealed files filled the space. But in the center stood a reinforced safe, larger than any he had ever seen, its surface engraved with the Okoro crest. Another key, tucked inside the notebook his father had given him months ago, fit perfectly into the lock. As the door creaked open, Nathaniel's breath caught. Inside were not jewels or gold but something far more powerful. A portfolio of offshore accounts, evidence of hidden wealth his siblings knew nothing about. A collection of letters, personal writings of Chief Richard, documenting Grace's manipulations, Vanessa's vanity, and Raymond's reckless habits. A video recording, his father speaking directly into the camera. Nathaniel slid the tape into the old projector at the back of the vault. The image flickered to life, and Chief Richard's weary face appeared, eyes sharp with both sorrow and determination. "My son," Richard began, his voice steady. "If you are watching this, it means I am gone and the battle I feared has begun. Grace and the others will not accept you. They will strip you of dignity, they will make you kneel. But I chose you because you know the strength in bending without breaking. This vault contains every safeguard you need, financial power they cannot touch, evidence of their betrayal, and the final truth of your inheritance." Nathaniel's chest tightened. His father's gaze felt alive, piercing across time. Richard continued, "Your siblings will try to destroy you, but remember this: integrity outlasts manipulation. If you wield these truths wisely, you will not only protect this empire, you will redefine it. But beware, even within these walls lies a truth so heavy, it may shatter everything you believe about this family." The recording ended, the screen fading into silence. Nathaniel stood frozen, his fists clenched around the notebook. The documents in the vault were weapons, proof that his siblings had betrayed not just him, but the entire legacy of the Okoro name. But his father's warning lingered like a haunting drumbeat, a truth so heavy, it may shatter everything. He closed the safe, his jaw set. If his family wanted war, he would give them one, but on his terms, armed with truths they could never have imagined. For the first time, Nathaniel realized the empire wasn't just his inheritance. It was his battlefield. The next morning, the Okoro boardroom brimmed with tension. 30 men and women in tailored suits filled the long mahogany table, their whispers sharp with doubt. At the head of the room sat Nathaniel, quiet yet commanding, his notebook resting in front of him. For the first time, he looked every inch the chairman his father had named him. Vanessa and Raymond entered dramatically, radiating confidence. Grace followed, draped in pearls, her eyes sharp with calculation. Their plan was simple: paint Nathaniel as unfit, sow fear, and reclaim control. Raymond was first to strike. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said with theatrical charm, "we are all aware of yesterday's shocking announcement. But ask yourselves, can a man who arrived at his own father's funeral in a taxi, dressed like a clerk, truly manage a billion-dollar empire? He doesn't belong in this room." Nods rippled through the board. Doubt was taking root. Vanessa leaned in, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Nathaniel may be family by blood, but leadership requires more than humility. It requires strength, vision, presence. And let's be honest, he has none." The board murmured in agreement, their gazes drifting toward Nathaniel. For a moment, it seemed the siblings' plan was working. But then Nathaniel rose, slow and deliberate. He opened his notebook, sliding out several sheets of paper, and laid them across the table. "You speak of strength and vision," he said calmly. "But what about accountability?" The directors leaned forward. On the papers were detailed records, contracts Raymond had mishandled, debts he had concealed, bribes he had approved. The evidence was undeniable. Gasps filled the room. Raymond's face went pale. This is fabricated," he stammered. Nathaniel ignored him. He turned to Vanessa and produced another file, scans of luxury expenditures she had charged to company accounts. Villas, jewels, even a yacht party in Monaco. You claim I lack presence, Nathaniel said evenly, yet you drained millions to present yourself as a princess. That isn't vision. That is vanity. The board erupted into shocked whispers. Vanessa's face burned crimson, her words choking in her throat. Finally, Nathaniel placed a sealed envelope in the center of the table. And as for accountability, my father left more than a will. He left letters, evidence, and confessions. Everything you need to know about this family's corruption is here. You can choose to protect them, or you can choose integrity. The directors stared at him, then at each other. For the first time, Nathaniel was not the outsider. He was the one holding the empire by its throat. Grace leaned forward, her voice low and venomous. You think you've won? This is only the beginning. Nathaniel met her gaze, his calm unwavering. No, mother. This is the shift. And soon the world will see who truly deserves to lead. The boardroom fell silent. The tide had turned. The beggar had become the master. But in the shadows of victory, his father's warning echoed still. A truth so heavy, it may shatter everything. The boardroom victory had shifted the balance of power, but Nathaniel's triumph felt incomplete. His father's words haunted him. Even within these walls lies a truth so heavy, it may shatter everything you believe about this family. That evening, alone in the vault, Nathaniel sifted through the remaining documents. One sealed folder stood out, stamped not with the Okoro crest, but with a discreet insignia he didn't recognize. Inside were DNA results, stamped and verified. His hands trembled as he unfolded the paper. At first he thought it was a mistake. Then the words burned into him. Subject: Nathaniel Okoro, paternity results. Father: unknown. Chief Richard Okoro, 0% biological relation. The room spun. His chest tightened as though the air itself had betrayed him. The empire, the fortune, the legacy he had fought for, it wasn't even his by blood. The recording flickered again on the old projector, as if summoned by fate. Chief Richard's face appeared, but this time his eyes carried a deeper sadness. My son, or rather the son I chose, Richard began softly. By blood you are not mine. You were the child of a man your mother loved before me, a man who abandoned her. Grace never forgave me for raising you as my own. That is why she despises you. But listen closely, your bloodline does not define you. Character does. The inheritance I left you is not about wealth. It is about stewardship, justice, and the courage to stand when all others bow. That is why you were the only one worthy. Nathaniel staggered back, his lantern flickering. All the humiliation, all the mockery, all the battles, it suddenly made sense. He was the outsider, not just in behavior but in truth. Grace had known all along. His siblings' hatred wasn't just greed, it was fueled by the belief that he was an intruder. Yet here was the paradox. Though not Richard's son by blood, he was the one chosen to inherit everything. The final letter in the folder revealed even more. It exposed how Grace had conspired years ago to discredit Nathaniel's real father, ensuring he would never return. Her ambition for her biological children had always been ruthless, and Richard's final act had been to counter it with the most controversial decision of his life, leaving the entire empire to the one child who had no claim by blood. Nathaniel sank to his knees, tears cutting down his cheeks. The truth was crushing yet liberating. He was not bound by the Okoro bloodline, but by his father's faith. When he emerged from the vault, his siblings awaited him, ready for war. But Nathaniel's voice was steady, ironclad with conviction. You called me a beggar. You called me unworthy. You made me kneel. But while you were blinded by blood and greed, Father saw what truly mattered. I may not carry his blood, but I carry his vision. And that, brothers and sisters, is why this empire is mine. The silence that followed was more powerful than thunder. For the first time they realized, nothing could undo him now. And yet, somewhere deep inside, Nathaniel wondered, had he inherited a blessing, or a curse?